Okay, and we'll start. Good morning. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Lori Bucklew, the Deputy Executive Director and Director of Government Affairs for the New Jersey League of Municipalities. On behalf of League President Mayor Pikaliski, we would like to welcome Charles Small, the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Intergovernmental Affairs for the U.S. Department of Transportation. In his role, he serves as the primary liaison for state, county, and local elected officials, leading outreach and engagement strategy with the non-federal stakeholders. Prior to joining the Biden-Harris administration, Charles served for 4 years as the Director of Federal Affairs for Mayor Eric Garcetti in the city of Los Angeles, where he secured the city's federal funding and permitting approvals supporting the city's and region's infrastructure agencies, including the LA Metro, Los Angeles World Airport, or commonly known as LAX, and the Port of Los Angeles, the LA Department of Water and Power, and the LA Department of Transportation. Before his service to the city of Los Angeles, Charles spent 5 years as the Associate Director of Federal Affairs for the state of New York and Governor Andrew Cuomo, where he led advocacy efforts on housing, energy, financial services, and secured approval from the Federal Communications Commission to help the state's broadband build out. Charles served in the Obama administration at the Office of the United States Trade Representative and began his career with Senator Barbara Boxer of California. He's a native of Southern California and a graduate of Smartworth College and a diehard Los Angeles Lakers fan. We won't hold that against him. Charles and his wife are the proud parents of a daughter, Jasper, and reside in Silver Springs, Maryland. Also joining Charles, as he mentioned, Nicole McDavid of the Federal Motor Carriers. Charles, I'm going to turn it over to you now, and thank you.
Oh, thanks so much, Lori, and it is great to be with all the local stakeholders here from the great state of New Jersey. I have a very long-winded title, but I think one of the best jobs in the department, and that's because I get to work, I think, directly with our non-federal elected stakeholders from across the country. So that means all 19,000 cities, municipalities, towns, and townships and boroughs, all 3,000 or so counties and parishes, all 55 states, commonwealths, and territories, and one very special District of Columbia, where I am broadcasting from live today here at the USCOT headquarters in Southeast Washington. We have been incredibly blessed in this administration through the work that we have in Congress to be stewards of a truly historic, once in a lifetime, generational, multi-generational probably, infrastructure package. It is really remarkable that we were able to pull this feat off, but we couldn't have actually done it without many of you. I know that many local stakeholders across the country, throughout the state, spoke with their members of Congress, spoke with their senators, and encouraged them to really think about the necessity and the needs of the American people, and try to put party politics aside. And through that, we've been able to have this historic $1.2 trillion investment in the U.S. infrastructure over the next several years. So just really, it was really incredible to be a part of that process, to be to play a role and sometimes be a fly on the wall to some of the incredible conversations that led to the development and then the final passage of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. We are now actually coming up, it's hard to believe, on the 6-month anniversary of the bill signing I believe that will be on May 15th is when the bill is actually, it will be 6 months to the day when the bill is actually signed. And so we'll be doing some celebratory stuff around that. And so one of the things that we really wanted to just go over is, to tell you, what have we been doing over the last 6 months, and kind of what opportunities are still out there, and in terms of the new programs that can be really influential and impactful to your communities. So what I'm actually going to do right now is just share my screen a little bit for a few minutes, just to go over some of the high level details here. And then what I'm actually going to do, just knowing the interest in trucking, I'm going to turn this over to my colleague here, and really have her come on and talk a little bit more about those specific issues. And then after that, I will come back to you and we'll do a little bit of a deeper dive into some of the more, I think, applicable things to the jurisdictions that you run when it comes to bipartisan infrastructure law. So hang on one second while I figure this out. And there we go. Can everyone see my screen?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Fantastic. All right, let's start this from the beginning. So just to take a step, kind of a big global step back. So the bipartisan infrastructure law actually did kind of two things for USDOT. One, it provided a ton of funding for us. It advanced about $660 billion over the next 5 years through a variety of existing and also new formula and grant programs here at the department. And so it's a record level of funding. It also additionally actually reauthorized our nation's surface transportation laws, which were due to expire, I believe it was last September. So there's a 5-year authorization on our nation's surface transportation laws. So we will be having I guess almost 4 years from now, 4.5 years from now, we will be in the throes of a discussion again on what we need to do to ensure that our core surface transportation assets are taken care of. Just to go over some of these totals with you on a high level. First, the biggest pot of funding, highways and bridges, which come through our federal highway aid program, that's at $365 billion and represents the single largest investment in highways in decades, as well as the single largest investment in our bridge system since the founding of the interstate highway system in 1956. So just really incredible stuff. The $107 billion for transit is actually represents the largest single investment in our nation's transit system in our country's history. So we're really excited about those possibilities and figuring out ways we can deliver better and world-class transit throughout the country. Rail investment. This represents, that's just $102 billion, represents the single largest investment in our rail system since the founding of Amtrak 51 years ago. So, and Amtrak just had their birthday a couple of days ago here at the department. So, so this investment, and I know rail is incredibly important to the state for a variety of reasons, and a lot of that funding, about I think a little over around 24 billion of that funding is actually just going to be dedicated to modernizing the Northeast corridor, a lot of which runs through the state of New Jersey. So that's going to be an incredible, a big opportunity for municipalities throughout the state. Traffic safety, and this safety piece is something that you'll continually hear throughout our comments at USDOT. Our number one mission, our core mission, is to actually ensure that all Americans, regardless of what mode of transportation they're taking, whether it's a train, an airplane, a car, a bus, a truck, a boat, that they get to where they're going safely. And so our safety funding is really, really critical. $5 billion for commercial motor vehicle safety. Nikki will elaborate a little bit more on that, as well as $2.25 billion for our maritime administration. And that's going to be really, really critical. I know also for the Port of New York, New Jersey, the Port Authority, one of the largest, I think second or third largest in terms of volume in the country. So we'll be making key port investments throughout the country, utilizing our Port Infrastructure Development Grant Program, which has around about $700 million this year. Also, our Build America Bureau. A lot of people don't know about this, but we actually have a bank inside of USCOT, essentially, called, or as we call it, the Bureau. And they have about $100 billion of lending authority to support all kinds of projects, from airports now to ports, to roadway projects, to transit projects. You could actually even build kind of non-traditional things like housing and schools and libraries actually utilizing this funding. So it's a really interesting thing, and I just wanted to make sure that we highlighted that. The $30 billion in private activity bonds allows us to work a bit with the private sector on specific projects. And then the $140 billion, that's just the overall footprint, a spending limit that we have here at USCOT when you combine all of our mandatory programs and our advanced appropriation or advanced funding programs that we got through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. So suffice it to say, we are pretty flush with cash right now, and financing opportunities that we're hoping to make available to all of the municipalities in this chat room right now. So that's kind of the high level overview. And so with that, I'm actually gonna stop sharing my screen for a minute and ask Nikki, are you on with us?
I am. Good afternoon, everyone. Charles, thank you very much. And I know during your introduction, I believe I heard you say that you have the best job in the DOT, but I have to say that I do. The chief of the Commercial Drivers License Division is so rewarding and so fun. We get to hang out with our state partners and make sure that our highways are safe and our CDL drivers are safe as well. So is it okay for me to get started?
Yeah, absolutely. Please do.
Okay, so Charles, I actually prepared a presentation on entry-level driver training. I believe that the municipalities may have been interested in hearing about our recently recently released, implemented entry-level driver training program. And I will share my slides and we'll get back to some of the funding, especially the grant funding for Bill, if that's okay.
That is perfect. Thank you.
Okay, so Lori, am I to share my screen? Yeah, this might be a little challenging for me. I don't think I've ever done this before.
Oh, okay. So let me try to talk you through it. So if you go to the share screen button at the bottom of the screen, the window, and you click on it, it should pull up a bunch of different windows at once. And if you just settle it on whichever one is your PowerPoint and click on that and click share. Okay, yeah, you started screen sharing. We can see everything.
Oh, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
I'm not that technologically challenged, but this was the first time.
Hey, congratulations. Now you have this life skill forever.
I get a gold star for the day. So thank you, everyone. As I mentioned, good afternoon. I'm Nikki McDavid. I'm the chief of the Commercial Drivers License Division. And I just want to give you all a high-level overview of our entry-level driver training final rule. And I know that a lot of you all have been wanting to hear about this or interested in it, or have actually had questions about our entry-level driver training rule. So it was published in 2016. It was mandated by our Moving Ahead for Progress in the 21st Century Act. And basically what it did, it established a federal standard, and it's a minimum standard for entry-level drivers and training providers. States must
Hey, Joe.
Sorry.
Hold on a quick second.
Okay.
Hold on a quick second.
Okay. So it established the need for the training provider registry, and it went into effect this year, February 7th of this year. It went off as far as implementation of the rule. We didn't have any issues with the system, and everything seems to be running smoothly. Our training providers are registered. Our drivers are getting their training. The drivers are getting their certificate information added to the training provider registry. So everything is actually working as planned. So I'm going to just go over a couple of just a couple of the requirements. So who is covered? So an entry-level driver is someone who has actually received their Class A or Class B CDL for the first time, a person that's upgrading from a Class B to a Class A, or someone that's actually getting their hazardous materials, passenger endorsement, or their school bus endorsement for the first time. So these drivers are required to go through minimum training, and they have to go through training from someone who is on our training provider registry. And I'll get into more of that detail a little later. So the training that our entry-level drivers must receive, they have to receive theory training, and some of the requirements of the theory training are listed on the screen. I'm not going to go through all of that. And they also have to receive behind the wheel training. So behind the wheel training includes range training and public road training. So the range training is all about, those maneuvers, the parking, the backing, all of that takes place on a range. And then also the public road training, how to actually operate their vehicle while you're out on the road. There are minimum standards, and there's a curriculum that goes along with this training, and the training provider must train to these standards and must deliver that training to our entry-level drivers. Entry-level drivers must score at least 80% on these, have to score at least 80% once they're assessed to make sure they demonstrate proficiency in these areas. We always get this question, and it's very important that we all know, what is a training provider? A training provider is actually an entity who's going to deliver entry-level driver training to our drivers. A training provider could be any entity. They could be a training school. They could be a motor carrier. They could be a local government. They could be a municipality. I could be a training provider as long as I self-certify and register with FMCSA, and that I am self-certifying that I am following the requirements that are established in the regulations. And I'll get to that in our next slide. Sorry, I need to. Apologies for not advancing the slides. So here, and I believe you will be provided a copy of these slides after the presentation. Okay, so these are the requirements that a training provider must self-certify to. One, they have to self-certify to the fact that they are teaching to the curriculum that has been established by the entry-level driver training rules. They have to certify that their facilities meet any state requirements that are established. They have to certify that their instructors meet the requirements of the entry-level driver training rule. They have to make sure that they adhere to any state licensing. That means if you're a training school, your state may require you to register with them, may require you to certify with them, may require you to get a business license with them. You have to make sure that you follow any state licensing requirements that are needed for New Jersey, for example. And you have to make sure, as far as that last section is concerned, making sure your vehicles are in safe and proper operating condition. So let's get into what our training provider registry is. Okay, so the training provider registry is actually a system that contains all of the information about an entry-level driver and also our entry-level driver training providers. It keeps the records of drivers that have actually gone through entry-level driver training. It stores it there for use by our state driver's licensing agencies. And it also allows drivers, not only drivers, there's some others that want to search for approved training providers. The training provider registry allows you to do that. So I'm just going to give you a high-level overview of what the training provider registry actually is used for. So here we are. So how does the training provider registry actually support entry-level driver training? So the first thing that I mentioned in the presentation was a driver has to get trained on the minimum requirements that are established by the entry-level driver training rule. And the training provider has to train to those standards. So the first thing you do is get your training. The driver receives the training and the training provider actually delivers that training. The training provider then submits that information to the training provider registry, okay? The training provider registry actually keeps that information and stores it in the system. And then our state driver's licensing agency actually retrieves that information when the driver applicant goes to the state driver's licensing agency to get tested for his or her CDL. So if that certificate or if that information about a driver completing entry-level driver training is not in the system, the state driver's licensing agency will not be allowed to actually test that driver. That information has to be there, and the driver must have passed all of the requirements before they can even take the test with the state. Okay, so, we get this question all the time. So how many training providers have actually registered to deliver entry-level driver training? So as of February the 28th, we have had 11,625 training providers register. And in New Jersey alone, we have 289 training providers who have registered to deliver entry-level driver training. We also get the question, so how many locations have actually have the training providers registered to deliver training, entry-level driver training in? And that answer is, and I'll show you what New Jersey is showing so far, is we have, as of April the 28th, 2022, of this year, we have 16,781 training providers that have registered to deliver entry-level driver training. And in New Jersey, we have 359 different locations where our entry-level drivers can actually receive entry-level driver training. And so just wanted to share that information with you. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact FMCSA at the URLs that are listed on the screen here. If you have any questions about ELDT, or if you need any support, feel free to contact us for any questions. And with that, Lori, I will hand it back over to you. If you have any questions, or Charles, I'll hand it back over to you to allow the participants to ask any questions they may have.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Nikki and Charles, for your comments today. We are going to open up the chat feature. At this point in time, we ask if anyone has any questions to place them in the chat box, and Paul will monitor them while we're waiting for folks to chat, to put their questions in. I know, Paul, you had received a couple of questions offline.
Sure. So the first one, Charles, can you talk to the Build American Bureau bank and what the application process is for that, and how municipalities can go about applying for funds through the Bureau?
So, look, I mean, it is specific to the type of project that you're trying to build. So it's a little hard to answer, necessarily exactly what that approval process will look like. What I can tell you though is that the Build America Bureau, they travel quite extensively. I'm sure they would be happy to come to New Jersey and meet with stakeholders directly. Typically, there needs to be some sort of, either, local or state, funding source. So, that is always going to be, kind of critical for them. But they're able to really build a lot of interesting projects, and some of the terms they offer are really favorable towards local municipal governments in terms of being able to build things. And they can actually do now 75-year terms on some projects, which really are able to, kind of makes the financing easier. And in some cases, they're actually able to use their loan programs to pay for the local match or local share when it comes to projects, which is another interesting feature. And that's usually just for, the smaller places, like, so, the LAs of New Yorks of the world, don't get that kind of treatment. They're really easy to get in touch with. If there's any interest in connecting with them, more specifically about a project, of course, they can either work through you, Paul, or email me directly, and I'd be happy to make that introduction. But I was literally just actually right before this virtual meeting, having my monthly check-in with that team, and I know that they're going to be heading up into the New York area in mid-June. So it'd be certainly very easy to stop over in New Jersey if there's interest.
Thank you, Charles. Yes, thank you. There certainly is interest from New Jersey municipalities for that, so we can connect offline for that. So the second question that came in is, can you talk a little bit about the infra grant process that is currently open through, I believe, May 23rd, and what municipalities, what kind of projects are eligible, and what should municipalities be highlighting in terms of need? Obviously, there are more projects than there's ever going to be funding for. So, best practices for highlighting need could be really essential.
Yeah. So we have a really interesting thing that's going on here at the Department of Transportation right now, where we are essentially bringing the college common application to the process of applying for grants to government. And this is really designed to streamline the process and make it easier for local governments as well as state governments to apply to our programs and be able to receive funding for their projects. So the one that was just mentioned is, I believe it's called the Multimodal Grant Opportunity or something. I think that's the formal title, but internally we just call it MEGA. And really what it does is that it combines 3 different programs. One, the National Infrastructure Project Assistance Program, which is about $1 billion. The Infra Grant Program, which you just mentioned, Paul, which is an existing program that we've had for many years, which really focuses on supply chain and goods movement, which is obviously a huge topic right now. And that's at a record $1.55 billion. We never had that amount of money before. We had $1 billion last year. And then a third program, which is a new program, the Rural Surface Transportation Grant Program, which is around $300 million. And that is for any municipality that is in an urbanized area under 200,000. So I would actually imagine a lot of municipalities in New Jersey would qualify for that as well. So the thing about that grant program is that you send us one application and you get considered for all three. So it would reduces paperwork, reduces the administrative burden, makes things easier on y'all. So with that grant opportunity, what I would say is this. There's probably going to be a lot of projects that are going to be focused on transit, especially on supply chain. So how are we going to get improve our ports, inland ports, local bridge systems to really be able to move goods in and around the country. I think one of the things that, and I would emphasize this with all of our grant programs, is we want to hear from labor. And if you are working with the unions down there, or have an apprenticeship or pre-apprenticeship program, and that's going to be a part of what you're trying to do, we want to hear that. If you're going to be utilizing local hire provisions, we want to know about that. And so any support from that community for your projects would always be great. I think just generally too, there are kind of 5 different North Stars, I would call them, that I think really guide the way we're implementing this bill, but also the way we're thinking about what projects we're going to support. So the first of that is safety. And safety is, as I said, the number one mission here at USDOT. To put that in perspective a little bit, we've had an unfortunate increase in traffic deaths, roadway deaths in the United States. We're trending, I think, 17% higher than we were last year. And last year, we unfortunately recorded almost 40,000 roadway deaths, which was the highest that we've had nationally since 2007. And that's when we were driving less because of the pandemic. Globally, 1.3 million people a year die from car accidents. That is the equivalent of like 5 Airbuses crashing every single day. If that were the case, no one would fly. No one. So we have to take that same culture of safety that we have and that we expect every time we get on an airplane, and we need to start applying that to our roadway system. So safety, we're going to be looking for projects that promote safety. We're going to be looking for projects that promote climate. We are going to be very supportive of projects that are going to be trying to take advantage of this energy transition that's being driven by the private sector. And really, how do we harness and be a world leader in those industries and secure those jobs for our families throughout the future? And how do we lower our greenhouse gas footprint and make sure that we have air to breathe in the near future? Additionally, we'll be focused on equity. And certainly that means ensuring that communities of color can experience the benefits of transportation as opposed to being divided by transportation. There's a reason why we have the phrase "the other side of the railroad tracks," but also that we're ensuring that funding gets to economically disadvantaged areas and rural areas. So there's many kinds of equity that when we say that word. Next is on transformation. We want to know the big projects, the projects that you've talked about for 20 and 30 years, and there's just never been enough money to do it. We want to know what those projects are because we want to fund those. We want to have that kind of transformational impact that actually makes people's lives easier. And then lastly, but perhaps most importantly, jobs, economic prosperity. We want to know how many jobs is this going to create? How many jobs is this going to affect? How is it going to move people better to job centers? That's a fundamental part of what we're trying to accomplish here at the Department of Transportation. So I would say kind of those 5 things, and maybe 6 with the addition of labor, are really going to be critical anytime you're thinking about this particular grant program, or any of our other grant programs. And if Paul, if I could just take a couple minutes here just to highlight a couple that I think are going to be really critical for your crew here. Number one, just getting back to safety. In the next 2 weeks here, I believe, we are going to be debuting our new Safe Streets and Roads for All program. This is going to be roughly a $1 billion grant opportunity to support Vision Zero and local safety initiatives for local governments. This program is only for local governments and tribal governments and MPOs. State governments cannot apply. So this is a program just for you guys. So, if you're trying to, if you have that unsafe intersection near a church, near a school, this is the program that can help you address that. Through this program as well, because a lot of this ends up, a lot of this ends up in this work. It's going to be a way that you can probably try to address some of your sidewalk issues as well as your streetscape issues as well. So for that Main Street in your local downtown. So that's going to be a really great program that you guys should be on the lookout for. Another key program that'll be coming out, that is already out, is the electric vehicles formula grants, and we want to ensure that local governments and municipalities are part of this EV revolution that's taking place in the country right now. I believe the state of New Jersey over the next 5 years will receive about $104 million over the next 5 years to support an EV charging station network. There are 2 dates that I want you to keep in mind. Date number 1, May 13th. That is when states have to nominate new alternative fuel corridors. There are probably already many of your interstates throughout New Jersey that are already on this corridor network. It's a DOT thing, but they'll be nominating a new round. The reason why that's critical is because the EV charging stations from the formula funding can only go in these corridors. So you need to make sure that your interstates, your state roads that are nearby are on this network. And that's May 13th. The next place, key date, is August 1st. That is when the state of New Jersey and all states and commonwealths will have to submit their state plans to USDOT for certification. We will turn those plans around in the next 30 to 60 days. So by the end of the fiscal year, by the end of September, you will start to see money flow for EV charging stations. And why that is critical is that we want to ensure that state governments are in touch with their municipalities. The secretary has wide authority here and can actually take 10% of a state's funding if we see that they are not really addressing the local and equitable needs throughout their state, and we can actually redo that part. Additionally, if states decide not to send us a plan or they decide to send us the money back, we can actually give that money directly to local governments in their states. So we have many ways to really ensure local and state cooperation when it comes to EVs. So I wanted to highlight that. A third program that I wanted to highlight is the Transportation Alternatives Program. This might not be one, this is probably one that maybe some of you are familiar with, but it supports safe streets to schools, trail networks, all kinds of great infrastructure. But what we had noticed is actually that states were just using that funding to support their highway budgets. They can no longer do that. They actually have to run now. They are required by law to now run a competitive grant program for about 55% of that funding, which will ensure that that funding gets down to the local level. So I wanted to flag that program as well. And the last program, which is the Carbon Mitigation Grant Program, another new program. And this is a really interesting one. And I believe the state of New Jersey will be getting around $156 million a year for this one. What's interesting about this is that one question that especially that I get from a lot of towns and townships is, I have sidewalks that just need rebuilt. Well, this Carbon Mitigation Grant Program is actually a way to rebuild sidewalks. So what your state highway, what New Jersey Transit, New Jersey DOT can do is they can actually what we call flex that funding over to the transit side of your state's DOT. And once you're able to do that, they can actually use that funding to then support your sidewalk projects, because the transit side has that capability. So that's one program that we're also really, really excited about, that I think will be helpful to a lot of locals, especially I think given the makeup of towns and townships in New Jersey. So those are just 4 programs that I really wanted to highlight. Safe Streets for All coming out soon, EV grants this fall, the discretionary grant side of our EV program, which is about 2.5 billion over the next 5 years. Those grant opportunities, so cities, municipalities can apply directly to UST for funding. Those programs will come out in the 4th quarter of this year. So look for that around the September, October timeframe. Yes, I will send you a list of funding requirements. If you allow me a second, I will try to pull up that website right now.
Charles, thank you for that fantastic information. We do have another question on that maybe Nikki can address, and it's the intersection of state and federal policy. So as you're no doubt aware, New Jersey has legalized recreational cannabis. So the question in the queue is, do you have any input or guidance on the interplay of federal CDL requirements and recent changes to New Jersey law prohibiting disciplining of municipal employees for off-duty cannabis use? So I understand that you can't necessarily comment on state policy, but do you have any best practices for what other states are doing, or has this come up in other states where recreational cannabis is also legal?
So
Yes, and
I'm actually, so yeah, sorry. Thank you, Nikki. I was going to actually turn that one over to you, so you might be in a better position to answer.
yes, absolutely. So I know that there's, it's sweeping across the country, is the decriminalization of marijuana. But for our CDL drivers, there are drug and alcohol testing and use requirements. So drivers that are required to have a CDL are also required to go through drug and alcohol testing. Pre-employment, random, post-accident, reasonable suspicion, those requirements still exist and will continue to exist until the rules change. So for our, for those municipal employees that may enjoy off-duty cannabis, they will still be subject to those drug and alcohol testing requirements. So they may pop positive if they do decide to, use cannabis off-duty. That requirement still exists. It's not going anywhere. If it does, I'm sure, everyone, there'll be the opportunity for rulemaking, an opportunity for notice and comment. So the entire country will be aware. But as of today, it's still a requirement for CDL drivers to go through the federal drug and alcohol testing requirements. But that was a great question. We get that question all the time.
Great. Thank you, Nikki. And thank you, Charles, for putting in the chat the upcoming funding opportunities and the current funding opportunities. So we just have a few minutes left here. So if anyone wants to put a question in the chat, now is the time to do so. And while we're waiting for that in the final minutes, Nikki or Charles, do you have any final closing comments? Thank you so much. This was wonderful information that was very useful for our municipal officials, and we really appreciate both of you taking the time to educate us today.
Yeah, so Paul, I put 2 things in the chat. One is our current upcoming funding opportunity schedule, and that this particular link will be updated continually, because one of the things, and there's this whole cottage lobbying industry on trying to find out when we were going to be making our grants, when we're going to announce them in terms of when they're available for applications. And what I think we realized here is that it's not a nuclear secret that we're hiding, that we should actually share this information with our project sponsors and with our municipalities so that they can prepare and plan. And so this is what it is. So we will be updating this particular link, so you may want to bookmark this one. Next, our rural team is really great. So I always like to highlight this, but they always have the best list of the current funding opportunities that are open at USDOT. So this is another one you may want to bookmark as well. So I wanted to just flag those two things for everyone. Also, one thing I do want to highlight, and I'll close with this. I'll actually close with a story about when the secretary visited New Jersey last. And we had like a top town hall up in northern New Jersey. I think it's the Raritan. I might be mispronouncing that. Kind of Valley Mayors Association. And one of the mayors said to the secretary, "I never could be the mom that I wanted to be because of my commute." And I think it's something that stayed with all of us. Because ultimately, why are we doing this? Why are we spending all this money? Why are we trying to improve our nation's transportation system? And it's fundamentally about us being better parents, being better brothers, being better sisters, having that family, making those kind of connections that you can only make by traveling from one place safely to the other. And that's why I'm really excited about this bill, is that we finally have funding to actually meet our ambition and the needs to allow us to be those better parents, those better family members. And so it's incredibly exciting here. We are absolutely thrilled to be stewards of this and to work with our local government friends to really deliver this law and make a really big impact for the American people. So, I'll close with that.
Yeah, very, very well said. Thank you very much. And thank you to the department and Secretary Buttigieg for the sharing of information. The Bipartisan Infrastructure Law Guidebook and the Rural Guidebook has been enormously helpful for municipal officials to help plan. So we will end with one final CDL question for you, Nikki. Can local governments create their own early driver CDL training programs that complies with federal requirements?
Absolutely, absolutely. And we are encouraging the local government to become training providers. What we're hearing from the industry is that, oh my goodness, my drivers are going to have to go to these schools and the schools are charging $8,000. In a lot of instances, the municipalities and the local governments, the state government are actually paying for the drivers to go through this training. And we tell the government the governments all the time, become a training provider. Adhere to the curriculum, adhere to the training requirements, adhere to the vehicle requirements, the state requirements, so you could become a training provider. And you don't have to, in some instances, they won't charge their drivers anything, but it's not a requirement for a driver to go to a training school. It's a requirement for a driver to receive entry-level driver training from a training provider, and that training provider could be anyone. Like I said, I could sign up to be a training provider as long as I am adhering to the requirements of our entry-level driver training. And we encourage local governments to sign up, and we see a lot of them registering. So the school districts are registering, the transit agencies are registering, the local governments are registering. We want to encourage local governments to continue to do that, so you could be a resource for your drivers and for your local municipality or your state government. So yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Nikki. Thank you, Charles. And thank you everyone for participating. I'm happy to turn it back over to Lori for some closing remarks.
Again, thank you everyone for participating, and thank you, Charles and Nikki, for your comments. Mayor Pickle, on behalf of Mayor Pikaliski, the league president, we thank you for it. We welcome the opportunity to work with you, and we welcome the opportunity to have future webinars along the way if additional funding becomes available. The one thing we have to learn here in New Jersey is rural is not what we think as rural when it comes to U.S. Department of Transportation. That, you know, that the definition of rural is much different. So I encourage our municipalities on the call to actually look, if you're not, we view as being a rural community, you still may be eligible for US DOT money.
Absolutely, absolutely. We actually have many definitions of rural inside of USDOT. I have a spreadsheet that talks about all of this. It's like, depending on the program, it's like 5 different definitions, and that's just with a DOT, regardless of, you know, what USDA thinks and EPA and all of our other sister agencies. But yeah, you know, why I think sort of generally, you know, people don't think of New Jersey as a rural place for our programs. Occasionally you can be, and that can be pretty useful.
Mm-hmm. So, and if you wouldn't mind sharing that your definition cheat sheet with Paul and I, we would love that to share with our members.
I'll see if I'm not even sure I'm allowed to have it, but I'll see what I can share, and happy to follow up there.
Right. Again, thank you so much. Thank you for your time. The recording will be available on demand. And again, thank you, Charles and Nikki, for your time this afternoon.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nikki.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Lori.
Great
Thank you,
hanging
Paul.
out.